With the Tour of Flanders contenders having a first good look at each other over the fast few days. Today, Ghent Wevelgem presents more cobbles, a chance to check on how form is progressing, and another opportunity to score UCI World Tour points. Good afternoon, and a very warm welcome to Flanders, where the winter will unfortunately just not leave. Temperatures fallen again, and since the E3 race a couple of days ago, snow falling to the ground again. Well, over the past few years we've had winners such as Bonen, Bernie Eisel, Boisenhagen, Ferreira, Burkhardt, Hussoft and Bonen a little further down again. And today, with a shortened course on the 75th edition of the Ghent Wevelgem, we would expect it once again to be won by a sprinter. Well, it's today the Kistel Wevelgem and not Ghent Wevelgem. Riders did come to Ghent to sign in this morning to Danes on the outskirts of town. Again, a very, very cold day. Heinrich Hauser and his IM Cycling Company boys getting warm before a further bus transfer would take them to the actual start in Gestel. Well, Adrien Petit there of Cofidis, he would be their sprint option. Europcar having Brian Coquard to try and rely on, the young French sprinter. In the meantime, a team that always seems to enjoy the classics, Garmin Sharp, having Tyler Ferrara, native of this part of the world, trying to find form again. 3 second place finishes for them this year, hoping to improve. Sebastian Rössler is always back. Needs to warm up before he starts. John Degenkolb for Argos Shimano. Big chance for him today as well to show off his stuff, certainly with the course now being shortened to 183 kilometres. Two options for Lotto Bellichol. Left hand side of your picture, Andre Greipel, the man they call Hulk, and Jürgen Rullet as the other man who you saw briefly in the picture there. Well, for Juan Antonio Fletcher, it would take a drive away from the peloton on one of the big bergs that will have 9 climbs, reduced from 10 today. Again, more about the route in just a moment or so. A route change won't make it too easy for Pippo Pozzato, you think. Options in Classics land for Orica Green Edge are the likes of this man, Sebastian Langeveld. We saw him have a decent break and an opportunity to try and get away the other day in the E3 prize. Blanco going with Sepp van Mark, the man who's made a move to the Dutch team. Enjoying himself since he left Garmin colours. Had good results last year, winning the Omloop. This year unable to compete as far as that's concerned. If it comes to a sprint, look out for this man, Alexander Kristoff, the light from Stavanger in Norway. Bernie Eisel, former winner here, and Edvald Boisenhagen for Sky is the Norwegian champion. Sky coming with an extremely strong squad, as have Omega Pharma Quickstep. We'll see them in just a moment's time. But it was the winner the other day who was in town to collect the applause, smiling after coming first in the E3 prize. Radio Shack's Fabien Cancellara. Current world champion and a former world champion, Philippe Gilbert and Thor Hussoft. And Philippe Gilbert, well, he found a novel way of keeping warm today.
You raised me though.
Pere Sagan a little more serious at the start. Pipped to the post twice in a week. A couple of second place finishes that he won't like. Any of these guys finishes first today, but it would have been a good day for Omega Pharma Quickstep. 2 former world champions, a current Belgian champion, and the fastest man in the peloton. So Tom Bonen or Mark Cavendish, who will they ride for? Well, we'll see as the race develops. This is how it looked like this morning in Gestel. About a 20-minute to half an hour bus ride down the road. Just towards the coast, taking away 40-odd kilometres of pretty snowy, nasty roads. Many of the riders woke up this morning with 5 or 6 centimetres of snow on the ground outside. A few of them tweeting away, joking that they'd have to use chains on the bike today. Luckily, in the end, none of that necessary. Well, as they were underway, there would be a fairly decent and quick start. And once the flag went, nobody wanting to wait. Crosswinds usually play havoc in this race. Today the wind's changing direction a lot. Tom Bonen wanting to get to the front and stay at the front with his team. Both him and Mark Cavendish are options today. So as far as the route is concerned, shortened to 183 kilometres due to bad weather. Around 50 k's chopped off. It was that sign-in as usual. Then the coast road down through Ostend, Newport and Rustbrugge. One ascent of the Camelberg has been cancelled out, so it's now 9 Hellinkernor climbs that include a couple of circuits around the Monteberg, Bannenberg and Camelberg. In total, 183 kilometres into the small town of Wevelgem, just down the road from Wevelgem and Harlebeke, the last couple of venues of our racing over the last few days. Well, the race passing by the North Sea, the weather getting in the way, and it's been pretty interesting as to what's happened so far. We had a first break of 24 riders fairly early on in the race. The winds playing havoc when they're along the course. A deluxe composition, the likes of Cavendish with their Bonen there as well. 25 riders behind, including the man you can see on your screen, the British champion Ian Stannard. Those two groups have come together now, and over to tell you exactly what's going on the course this afternoon. It's a good afternoon to my colleague in the commentary box, Jonathan Harrisbass.
Well, thank you very much, Rob. As you say, that deluxe breakaway has finally been reeled in. There are now 53 riders out in front as they come towards the first of the 9 bergs that they'll be taking on in today's race. 98 kilometres still left to run here at the finish. It is the Camelberg that they will be taking on first, though, in this short sojourn into France that this particular race makes before they make their way back into Belgium, into Flanders and through to the finish here. The Camelberg usually is taken on twice in Ghent Wevelgem, but this year it will just be the one occasion, and then we will see them take on the Katzberg, the Kokerilberg, Bannenberg, the Camelberg, Monteberg, Bannenberg again, and then the Camelberg and the Monteberg once more before they have around 30 kilometres once they reach Ypres, or Ypres as it's known in the local dialect, and then in towards the finish here, which is all pretty flat once they come through. This race is generally decided on the climbs up the Camelberg. Even if you don't manage to pull away there, it's just how exhausting it proves to be for the sprinters. Mark Cavendish has shown some decent form on climbing so far, and a 9th place finish in Milan-San Remo last week was a decent finish from him. So very similar conditions being experienced by the riders. It was Frank Koster, the man who runs all of the Flanders Classics, who said that they wouldn't be falling into the same trap as the Milan-San Remo, and that riders would be being looked after more than the importance of the route, and that's been reflected in the chopping off of some 60 kilometres of the normal race route here. And he was a 1984 winner of the Tour green jersey, Frank Koster. And we have a number of former winners of Ghent Wevelgem who are looking after the riders out there. Bonen, Cavendish, Meis and Steybar. We're running through all of the riders out in this front group at the moment, down to number 50 of the riders, but there are 7 riders from Sky in this front group. There are 6 riders from Omega Pharma Quickstep. I have a feeling there are 6 riders from BMC as well, and there's a decent representation for Lotto Belisol. So of all of the teams that we were looking at for favourites coming into this race, they all have decent numbers out in front. And Sky, who only had 2 out in that initial breakaway, very, very composed about allowing the 5 riders in the second group to catch back up, and now are controlling the pace at the front. And it was exactly the same for the BMC racing team as well. Philippe Gilbert, Thor Hushoft and Greg van Avermaet, none of them were involved in the first breakaway, but they were in the second group, and they're now up in the ranks of this group of 50 riders. It is a stunning group of 50 riders. There are still 97 kilometres to go. They have 9 climbs. They're just starting the first one right now, but so much to be decided. And the wind conditions, the cold, so many different factors could have affect the outcome of this race. But it's just going to be very interesting to see how the main sprinters cope with all of the climbing that they have to do today, because this particular climb, the Camelberg, the one climb that they have to take on in France, is very exposed to the elements, and they were very worried about it icing up overnight. They've been out with salt out on the route, but it's just going to be very interesting to see exactly how bad it is. And pictures we've seen from the women's race, which is currently going on, that started in Ypres and will be heading across the finish line in the not too distant future. We saw one of the Rabobank vehicles off the road and crashed into a telegraph pole, showing you that the conditions out there are pretty treacherous if you get anything wrong. So we're hoping that everything will have been cleaned up by the time that this main peloton comes through.
Well, yes, Rabobank, of course, continuing their sponsorship of women's cycling, hence Rabobank being mentioned there. Well, it's good to see a group of real quality riders out here, and invariably in recent years this race has ended in a sprint. It's a long way to the finish line after the final climb. All of the bergs condensed into a space of just 60 kilometers in this race. But out of this group, we've got the winner from the other day, Fabian Cancellara. There's Juan Antonio Fletcher, there's Matti Brechel. There are riders who can make a run for it, and of course expect the attacks, probably in vain, but expect them anyway towards the end of this race. Bora Buzic is in there, a man who came second in Dwars door Vlaanderen the other day, won by Oscar Gatto. Gatto's team, Vini Fantini, not invited to this race. Of course, we're on the World Tour here, so 18 World Tour teams, or we should say 19 this year with Katusha involved, and the invited teams. Those teams at pro-continental level that are here are Top Sport Vlaanderen, as you'd expect in this particular arena, and Quillan Euphony. Plenty of their riders back in a second group chasing at the moment. Johan Alfredo, it looks to be leading them on. Accent Jobs are here too, as are Cofidis from over the border in France. Valbois and Horgan. I Am Cycling have Heinrich Hausler, and Team Europe Kart, well, they did have Brian Coquard as their main sprint hope, but Jérôme Cousin was the only man that got himself into that early main group.
Very interesting what you were saying, Rob, about the nature of the finish of this race. It's known as the Sprinters Classic. Moved in 2011 to a weekend race. Always used to be a midweek race, of course, previous editions. But the very interesting thing about it is that even though it is seen as a sprinters race, 2011 and 2008, the last two occasions in the last 5 years where it has been a mass bunch sprint. Last year there were 30 going for the line. It's more usual to have a large-ish group involved in a sprint, as we saw last year. Last year, of course, Peter Sagan would have been by far the favourites to get across the line out in first place, but just made a few tactical errors, and it's those sort of tactical errors that we've seen from Sagan that have just led people to perhaps question whether he's going to be as successful in classics at the start of his career as some people perhaps thought he might be.
Yeah, it's all about that tactical nous and a little bit of experience and putting it to good use, of course. Any BMC moves are going to be marshalled. Same with riders from Sky, a Megaformer Quick Step. You can see the two riders at the front for Megaformer just having a chat, seeing what they do here. Anybody wants to follow just in case.
Tactically, BMC really do only have one main option here, and that is to try and attack on every single one of the 9 climbs that they're going to be taking on, because if they can pull the likes of Cavendish along just a little bit out of his comfort zone and exhaust him, then they're going to be giving their riders a much better chance come the end of the race, obviously.
Well, the deluxe nature of the team, yet again lined up by Megaformer Quickstep, is that it's not just Cavendish. It's Tom Bonen, of course, man who enjoys this race. But with the way that it's been shortened today, well, there's never going to be a better chance for any of the big thick leg sprinters to win this race. So you have to think that the plan A at the moment is to ride for Cavendish. Now, Andrei Grivko on the right hand side for Astana, Ukrainian champion, riding away. Just being followed at the moment by his rival from BMC, who is Michael Scher. Michael Scher and Ian Stannard, the top two in that group. So, a couple of groups starting to come together as they ride up the Camelberg. Team cars being told to get out the way on the race radio. It's not easy, of course, when the roads are so thin. And as Jonathan said right at the start of today's telecast, we're still in France here.
Still in France, they hit a few of the cobbles. Remember, of course, when they take on the Camelberg, the entire climb is over the cobbles, which really does sort the men out from the boys. 92 kilometres to go as they reach the top of the Camelberg climb, and then it'll be the swifter descent and missing out the loop that is usually part of this race, and then heading down back towards the border, and then they'll come back into Flanders before reaching what is definitely one of the most decisive moments in Ghent Wevelgem every single year, and that is the loop around the Camelberg.
Well, peloton coming back together with just over 90 kilometres to go. Don't be surprised if you see another break forming here. Motorbike being asked to go past by the Française des Jeux rider, who obviously wanted to pick up some food. There's a first glance at the Accent Jobs riders. So we saw Standard at the front, perhaps thinking about getting in what could be the next break. Don't expect it to stay together for long, of course. There's a long way to go yet, and it would be a very big surprise if things didn't settle down at least for a time again. 92 k's as they're on the descent from the Camelberg. Ooh, a little bit of naughty nasty bike handling going on there from Ian Stannard, who might have been worried there. Just lost control briefly. It's just one of those days. There is unfortunately the prospect of the odd bit of ice still being on the road, and as far as that's concerned, the DS, the Director Sportif from Omega Pharma Quickstep, Wilfred Peters, has actually said that if a rider has an accident, if a rider falls because of any ice, then the peloton will stop and the race will not continue. So let's hope, first for safety and then second for the fact that we can have a race to watch here, that doesn't happen.
Well, lots of discussion has been evolving in the world of cycling recently about the use of brake discs on bikes and how it's going to allow certain riders to handle their bikes that much better on descents. For example, Bradley Wiggins, not really renowned for his aptitude when it comes to descending the mountains. Many people will probably feel that that's incredibly harsh criticism for a man who's picked up such an incredibly stellar performance last year on the Tour de France and also with his performance in the Olympics. But he is renowned as not being particularly good when it comes to descending, and certainly no Vincenzo Nibali.
Well, the pace really picking up here. Everybody jockeying for position. There's 91 k's to go, but again, the race in just an unstable moment, and it's pretty important as to see which break, if any, forms again. Now, Matt Heyman, we've seen him on the front for so long this week in various different races. He's wrapped up again there. There's Nico Mace for company for Omega Pharma Quickstep. Lotto Belisol will of course want to be up there as well. Quick look round from the man up the front. They have Jürgen Rullant, but more likely Andre Greipel. Grifko now is the man that's going to go, and there is Juan Antonio Flecha, and he, you will have to think, would have to be part of any break. It's been a worrying few days for differing reasons for Vacances Soleil. A lot of dangerous talk off the bike about what could or couldn't be happening with regards to possible sanctions for some of their riders. At least one fairly big name rider, a new signing. But with none of that resolved, it's better to leave well alone.
Well, they're heading now down towards what is the second climb of the day, slightly smaller one, the Katzberg and then the Kokorilberg, before they reach the start of the loop around the Camelberg, which begins with the Bannerberg climb. And just conscious all of these riders will be of the fact that, as you've already mentioned, Rob, you want to be out in front at the start of those climbs because the roads really do narrow, and we've seen just how much the peloton has been stretched there on the descent down from the Camelberg. So this is a race which has been won before just off the descent of the Camelberg, and riders always will bear in mind the history of the sport, and they all know their history of the sport so well, none perhaps more so than Mark Cavendish, who was listed as probably the favourite along with Peter Sagan before the route was even chopped down as it has been. However, Andre Greipel, I still definitely fancy his chances, and I mean, there's a long list of riders who could potentially win this.
Well, it's difficult to call Cavendish the clear favourite in my opinion. I think Tom Bonen would have to be up there again. Certainly before the route was chopped down, we had a little longer in the legs, and Bonen, perhaps just looking at the route, would have to be considered, but given the fact that he is still not at peak form and working his way up, with next week the big objective for him, you have to agree that today they are most likely to be riding for Mark Cavendish. Well, we saw Edvald Boss and Hagen coming in. It looks as though the groups might well come back together here. Just saw Matt Heyman just slowing them down again a minute ago. Interesting moment of the race again. The fast pace seems to have been put down for the moment. Perhaps allowing a few riders back into the mix who might think about breakaway, who wouldn't be too worrying to many of the big teams up there. 90 k's to go as we see the race start to come back together. On the way to the second climb of the day, which will be the Camelberg. Plenty of runners and riders before the day started. It's a course that produces usually just about enough doubt as to one's mind as to whether it's one for the sprinters directly or a traditional cobble classic. Today, with the shortening of the route, it's certainly edging more towards the sprinters, but as you can see, opportunity for new breakaways is forming. We have Juan Antonio Fletcher in that front group at the moment. Andrei Grifko is there as well. Skyrider is Bernie Eisel. That little former Austrian champion's band on his shirt. Of course, Bernie Eisel is a former winner of this race, let's not forget, as is Edvald Boasson-Hagen. And look at this, peloton split into 4 clear groups, as we can see.
And each group in turn is trying to pull it along to catch up with those front riders. Just Cannondale making the move now to bring that second group back into contention with Group 1, but they really are splintering there.
Well, so many big names in the mix here today that it's difficult to let any group go away without anything too much happening. The presence of Peder Sagan up there at the minute is making sure that there is plenty of movement behind. You can see the wind really affecting things. Prevailing winds have changed this weekend here. Tom Bonen up in that front group as well, as you can see. Andrei Greipel is there, so once more all the big contenders are back together as far as the sprint's concerned. But with the winds changing, they're usually crosswinds on the coast. Today there were more of a tailwind on the coast, hence the very, very fast first hour of 51, almost 52 kilometres covered. And here, as they head inland again, winds all over the place, not prevailing from anywhere, they're just blustery, and a lot of the time coming up and manifesting themselves as crosswinds as well. Once more, just briefly settles down again, and that is until the next little escape attempt, we'll see. Race really yet to settle. Cancellara, we get a glimpse of him for the first time on the left-hand side. Philippe Gilbert's in there as well. Interesting to see if Thor Hushovd can show us any sort of form. It looked as though he'd been riding himself back into something, or some semblance of form in Tirreno Adriatico. However, in the last week or so, he has disappointed quite greatly. Left-hand side of your screen, Luca Paolini in the Katusha uniform, wearing that black jersey to signify that he's pretty cold indeed, just like everybody else out there. Of course, he's already won on Belgian soil this year with his Omloop het Nieuwsblad win. Saxo Bank have lined up a stronger team today. Daniele Benatti and Matti Breskel. And they have Matteo Tossato as a possible lead-out man as well. So a little better than the paltry, poor effort of the team that was put out at Varsdorf London. Philippe Gilbert there, riding without any gloves on. Absolutely freezing.
Yeah, he's about the only person I've spotted in this lead group who is not wearing gloves, Philippe Gilbert, which is an extraordinary decision from him. Just starting to climb once again here up the Camelberg, which will lead them, of course, over the top of the second of the 9 climbs that they have to take on today. An undulating course that they have to take on here. One of the Gilles Desert riders leading things along. Plenty of French representation. It's been, of course, a wonderful start of the year for French cycling. A real resurgence coming through after years in the doldrum.
As the police motorbike just cuts it a little fine, rushing past Ladagnou at the front, the French rider. 1 minute and 21 seconds. A much more relaxed little attitude at the back here for BMC. Gilbert expected to be at the service of Thor Hushovd today, according to media reports. Again, he's focused very much on the races in April. Ian Stannard at the service of plenty of big riders, but the way he's been riding, he might get the opportunity to have a go at the classics himself in certain races. He's been in an extraordinary form. Plenty of fast men in the Sky squad today. Edvald Wozen, Horgan, Chris Sutton, Bernie Eisel. Gabriel Rasch is a man, former Norwegian champion, who we've seen doing plenty of the work. And there he is, just behind the BMC rider, just in front of Mark Cavendish, who's at the centre of your picture. Andre Grifko in there as well. And for Movistar, it's the former Spanish champion, José Joaquim Rojas. Fast man himself, alongside Fran Ventoso. Movistar have a strong team. Enrique Sanz is here doing his learning, but there's Gio Visconti, Andre Amador, Alex Dowsett, who can turn a wheel or two, and Eloy Teruel, who we saw on a break a couple of days ago.
Well, it's certainly going to be whoever gets across that finish line in first place, the true definition of a Flandrien, because they are taking on not only the cobbles, which was seen as the test of endurance to see who was a true Flandrien, but also these weather conditions. And at the moment, I have to be honest, Philippe Gilbert riding there without gloves on is almost doing a one-handed job on that front. Fletcher's also really putting the hammer down out in front. You've got another member from Gilbert's BMC team there on the left who has elected against gloves, but they are very few and far between amongst this chasing group, who have seemed to allow Fletcher to get out in front, taking it nice and slowly. 1 minute and 23 seconds the difference, but conscious of the fact that they'll have plenty of time to close the gap on that lead trio as and when the time comes. Still 77 kilometres to go until the finish, of course, and that includes 2 climbs up the infamous Camelberg, which is always where everything's sorted out as far as the Ghent Wevelgem is concerned.
Well sorted out, but there's plenty to go after the climbs for it all to come back together. I'd expect a bunch sprint of sorts today, but this group working together for now. 1 minute 27, the gap gaining all the time. The turn of Ladagnou at the moment to do some riding. Mathieu Ladagnou, former winner of the 4 Jours de Dunkerque, race that we'll see next month in this area, bizarrely called the 4 Days of Dunkirk, even though it's 5 really. An extra stage added back in the 60s, I think.
I was going to say it started out as the 4 Days of Dunkirk, and like the majority of these cycling races, they're steeped in tradition and they like to keep the same name, even though there are 5 days rather than 4 now.
Well, the rider at the back there hails from Pau, which is a very important town on the Tour de France, been used many times down south. And he was, of course, part of the 2006 French World Championship pursuit winning team on the track. So again, a very, very strong rouleur. Talking of strong riders, Bazaev is, of course, a national champion as well.
You were talking, Rob, about the fact that the riders have been spending so much time on the rollers. I think Mark Cavendish, who tweeted yesterday that he doesn't think he's ever spent this amount of time at the beginning of the season inside, looking at the snow falling outside and having to do all of his training on rollers.
Well, I know plenty of you watching down under in Australia, New Zealand, the Asia Pacific region. I've just had a couple of tweets in reminding us that summer's hanging around down there, so thanks to Debbie who tweeted in for that one. We're all a little jealous. We certainly wish you'd send some of it up here. I think those out there in the saddle would wish that at the moment anyway, because it is very, very cold indeed. 1 minute and 50 seconds we're being told in our ear. 1 minute 39 according to our television GPS. It is growing all the time. 76 kilometres to go and we're on our way back into Belgium. It's not the only race to cross over the border at this time of the year around here. The work has been shared out pretty democratically so far. As Philippe Gilbert just has a chat or two. It's quite clear that he is the man who is at the service of Husov today, because Gilbert is spending a lot of time on the front, in conversation at the moment with Ian Stannard. Of course, 2 riders who know each other very, very well indeed. Johan van Sommeren not too far from the front for Garmin. Andre Greipel tucked in nicely as well. This is the time of the day where it's the calm before the storm, really. They're quite happy to let the brake go, get a decent gap. But of course it still has to be monitored. With all the Ghellingen involved, it's something that riders will not want to let get too serious. 2-3 minutes, I'm sure, would be acceptable. Remember, after the final climb, there's more than 30 kilometres for any gap that's still out there to be closed down. So still expect a sprint. Question is, what kind of sprint will it be? What calibre of riders will we have? And you have to say that, yes, the weather's cold, it's a hard day, but given the fact that the race is now 183 kilometres and there's one of the 10 climbs been taken out, place your bets on most of the big guns, I think.
Without a doubt, the riders who certainly have been spoken about most, Mark Cavendish, as we've already mentioned, spoken about so much, and in his favour definitely this year. It has come down to a sprint finish so many times. He's in good form, he's fresher than those who competed in the E3 Harlebeke just a couple of days ago, and his team are a team that was built for the Belgian Classics, and one cannot forget that. Tom Bonen, the two-time defending champion, is out of form, so Cav could well be their best chance at this one. So, I mean, all of those things go in his favour. His negatives definitely are that his best finish here is 17th, which came back in 2008, and one has to remember, of course, that Roger Hammond actually finished ahead of him that year, so it wasn't really a sprinter's day. Hammond finishing in 10th position. His best finish, other than that 17th place finish, was 55th, so Mark Cavendish, he's shown better form on the climb so far this season. He's in good nick, but there are still too many question marks that he still has to answer.
On a flat section of cobblestone, particularly good condition, so it's not listed as one of the major obstacles that riders have to list. And we're back into Belgium now, into the town of Westhoeter. That means that we're very, very close, just 4 kilometres away from climb number 4. Should be climb number 5. Basically, we shall see the next 3 climbs repeated again as we head towards the end. It's the Bannenberg, the Camelberg and the Monteberg before a 30-odd kilometre run towards the finish again. At the moment, calm reigning through the peloton. 2 minutes and 7 seconds the gap. If you're joining us a little late, just to let you know that Mathieu Ladagnou of Frances Deschamps, Astana's Hassan Bazayev and Vacances Soleil rider Juan Antonio Flecha are out there in front. 2 minutes and 7 their advantage, with 73 kilometres still remaining in the 75th running of the Ghent Wevelgem, today as most have referred to it as the Crystal Wevelgem. Actually started from 40 k's down the road.
Interesting thing to note here is that it's slightly more enclosed, the route for the next 30 kilometres or so, and the Camelberg, of course, is very enclosed, and as a consequence those crosswinds, which caused real havoc with the peloton around 15, 20 kilometres ago, aren't going to have any impact. Now these riders are very close indeed to the start of the Camelberg. Well, first of all, of course, it's the Bannenberg, but they are moving very close to that now, and as you can see, the Bannenberg with just a 30 metres in length but a maximum gradient of 20% can really take something out of the legs.
Well, the first time up at the Bannenberg here, it's the rider from Astana, I should say, Almaty, pardon me, the former capital of Kazakhstan, who just moves off to the back now. Capital of Kazakhstan moved a couple of years ago by the president. Now onto this thin road. This is where the peloton behind will have to be alert. Of course, they've been in a little laissez-faire sleep mode for the last few kilometres or so. But this is where accidents can happen. We saw a pretty nasty one the other day in Dwarsdorf, London, involving Jack Bauer. And it gets steep here. 20% is the maximum gradient up the Bannenberg. Plenty of people on the circuit already. This is where you'll start seeing the big crowds on this race. They ride up here not once but twice. Should have come 166 kilometres in, and after this it's just 8 kilometres before they head to the Camelberg. Camelberg and the Monteberg are 2 climbs that come within a couple of kilometres of each other. Amador is the latest to take his turn on the front, and there's some good work being put in. Look at this gap growing now. Yes, it's 1 minute 22 with the 2 climbs still to come. Before we start making any big predictions, I think we'd have to wait to see exactly the state of the gap and the composition of the group once they get to the other side of the Camelberg as we come into Camel, and of course the final climb, the Monteberg, yet again. Camelberg is the more difficult of the two, no doubt about that. Just to remind you that there are well over 500 metres of nasty cobblestones.
Well, it was interesting to see when they went up the first ascent that there were no signs of ice on those cobblestones, which will have been greeted with a certain amount of relief by the riders. And again, just looking back at the peloton, and they are, no one's seizing the initiative and driving the pace along. It's giving every opportunity to this breakaway at the moment to increase their lead, and that's exactly what they're doing.
Sagan pedalling on at the front, and his national champion's jersey for Cannondale. Bernie Eisel on his wheel, Juan Antonio Fletcher just behind. There's Basayev and Hausler, Bozic as well. Remember, 2 of the Astana riders there. De Bussera is the presence for Lotto Belisol. 96 for Française des Jeux, Ladagnou. And this is the opening part of the climb up to the Camelberg, the part that's on concrete for the final turn into the area where the cobblestones lie. Sagan looking behind for Bodnar, his teammate in the green. Stein Vandenberg, a man who would have to attack on a breakaway here. Just have a look around at his men. Look into the eyes of Sagan, see what sort of condition he may be in. He want to be up the front here, Will Vandenberg, or fairly close to it. Watch out for Fletcher as well, who just sorts out his chute. This is the area that these guys have to go. If it's still together afterwards, you can kiss goodbye to chances of the likes of Vandenberg and Fletcher taking the win here.
As things currently stand, Peter Sagan is the firm favourite to win this race, and if this remains a decisive break, which at the moment it looks quite inclined to be, then it could all be over. They hit the cobbled section at the start of the Camelberg for the final time, and it is a group of 13.
Well, watch them fight it out here. All about positioning, all about rhythm as you get onto the cobblestones, and who will be the strongest. This is the launch pad for anybody who has to win from a breakaway. The view back up to the top as we await them arriving. Van Avermaet, 20% in stages this. Sagan just churns away the pedals. No attempt from Vandenberg just yet. Neither Fletcher. This is hard. This is very, very hard. Fletcher and Vandenberg, watch for them. Van Avermaet is the most advanced rider as it stands. He's a man that can win with a quick finish as well. But none of these would be likely to beat Peter Sagan given current form. Hausler is one who could challenge. Jaroslav Popovic brings up the rear.
He is one that could challenge. You just question, would Hausler get it tactically right? He'd probably have to go a little bit early, and if he went early, Peter Sagan is the sort of rider who can respond firmly to that. He's now back out of the seat and having to accelerate to catch up, because once again they're applying a little bit of pressure at the top here.
It's good pressure from Fletcher as well. He's the man that's motoring on alongside Van Avermaet. 3 strongest riders, the 3 we expected to be the strongest up the top here, as they're off the cobblestones. Nothing doing just yet as far as any gaps up front, but who has been left a little weaker by that? 1 climb remaining now, and that comes almost immediately on the Monteberg. It's Fletcher who leads them alongside Sagan, Van Avermaet, Vandenberg. A quick time for a little swig of drink, and it's back to business once more as we wait for the rest of the peloton. Luca Paolini, the winner at Omloop het Nieuwsblad. Just behind Philippe Gilbert there. Pipo Pozzato is still up the front, as is Matthew Heyman.
It's going to have to be a fairly epic amount of work done there by the big teams in order to reel in this breakaway.
Well, Maciej Bodnar, the man just being disconnected a little from that group. Found it more difficult than anybody else, the Polish rider. Hence the reason I think that Sagan was talking on his radio a moment ago, just being told to allow his teammate back onto the front here, certainly while Sagan was at the front. Hence he controls the descent on the way down. Wooded area, thin roads. It's going to be interesting when the rest of the peloton heads down here. At the moment, the very sensible tactic is to keep it nice and thinned out. There's Pipo Pozzato, Heyman just beside him. And who can stay up here? Cavendish really driving it. No sign of Fran Ventoso. Grifko still there, Bagdonas, Hussoft, Edvard Boisenhogen as well.
Thought Hussoft was in there as well. BMC had big hopes for him, certainly earlier on in the way that they were riding. He and Stannard dropping right the way back.
Stannard towards the back in a rare showing of some sort of weakness from him in the last few days. Great ride in Milan San Remo, so strong on the Poggio. Not Cavendish though, only chose to get back on after the bus transfer on what is now being known as the Sunday Rail Replacement Service, I think. Cycling trains substituted by the bus transfer for the second week in the running this weekend. But Cavendish, having seen they took out Le Manier climb, was back on but was left really without any teammates. It's a decent ride from him, certainly considering that fact, as Europe car sporting the strangest sunglasses that we've seen for a while. Andre Greipel right at the back, not what we want to see if we're after a big sprinting duel here. There was Heyman. Still no gloves for Philippe Gilbert.
Looking like a few problems for Philippe Gilbert, unless that's the way that he warms his hands up, of course. 45 kilometres to go. Breakaway group pushed along at the front by Astana. Astana with Hasan Bazayev and Borut Bocic as their two riders in this breakaway. The Sagan just sitting back there now next to Bocic, comes up alongside him. Once again onto race radio from Sagan, just to check exactly what sort of distance there is between this group of 12 riders and the chasing group, which contains all of the sprint big guns.
Once again it contains Stein van den Berg. What an absolute hero of a rider. He was there in Omloop, he was there in Dwars door Vlaanderen, also there the other day, just 2 days ago in the E3. Here he is for the 4th time on Belgian roads, going again. Saxo Bank in the meantime trying to get their dig in. Previous success from Adi Breskel here, just having his little attempt again. And now then, we have problems for Maciej Bodnar. Looks behind, and I think he's got a mechanical puncture.
Well, he was struggling to keep up a few moments ago anyway. This could be problematic for Sagan though. Let's see just what happens, because that lead's come down.
Well, Sagan, rather strangely going straight to the front. Bodnar having his front wheel replaced. Looks behind him. Perhaps just trying to control things. Making sure there are no attacks without him on watch as he looks behind. Game talks away as we see Amador off the pedals. A quick chat with Fletcher. No language communications with those two, both Spanish speakers of course. I wonder if they're plotting something on this final little ascent here. It is the Monteberg. Bernie Eisel, one of those men will be hoping to keep it together. This is the group that's up front though. Bernie Eisel, as I mentioned, Vandenberg, Bozic, Bodnar, Sagan, Ladagnu, Amador, as well as Heinrich Hausler, Jaroslav Popovic and Juan Antonio Flecha. A list of stellar names really. And of course, the way it's been going recently, guess who's the favourite? Yes, Peter Sagan without doubt. Radio Shack's Popovic back to the car, of course Duc de Mol, former classics specialist himself. He's out there in the car. He's also directed several big names on the classics victories. One of those was riding today, Stena de Volder. Well, just a message going out on race radio at the moment telling all the team cars that it's time that everybody saw the numbers on the back of their jerseys. 28k from the finish. They are the rules. They have to cross the line with the numbers visible. We've already had a couple of riders such as Philippe Gilbert complaining about that rule this week, and we might and expect to start to see a few of the rain jackets to come off and those race numbers to be made visible. Heinrich Hausler still leading things on his wheel, Andre Amador, the Costa Rican rider. Of course, Ukrainian heritage as well for him. Popovic, in the meantime, whatever he was trying to sort out, is struggling.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to be going too well for him there. Greg van Avermaet just discarding the outer jacket there, as all of these riders are, which will allow us to see their numbers. Thought it was a very interesting tweet I read earlier about Heinrich Hausler, where someone suggested that he didn't think he had any genuine chances of winning. He was just trying to get through to the finish as quickly as possible to get a cure for frostbite, because he's one of the few riders out there without gloves on, which I quite liked.
He's doing his best.
This lead group have been doing their best to stay out in front, but once again, all of a sudden, just taking a bit of a dent there. Jaroslav Popovic dropped out of it for a few seconds, and having one less man to push the pace along seems to be having a decisive effect on the way that they are able to pace things. But as things currently stand, still, you feel that that group behind needs to start to make proper impressions here, because they are not managing to reel it down as fast, anywhere near as fast as they would like to. And we look at the time now, still 1 minute and 23 seconds the difference between the 11 riders out in front and those chasing in the second group, and there are only 26 kilometers to go.
Well, look at the sprinters in this group. If this is going to stay together here, we have Eisel, of course, winner of big races on very few occasions before, but he's proved that he's fast. Of course, he made his name as a lead-out man in recent years. Chance for himself here if he's going to arrive in this group. The likes of Bozic as well, who was second the other day. Wins have dried up for him in recent years after a promising start. Heinrich Hausler, talked about him and his lack of wins. He puts in another little dig at the front, but Peter Sagan, 5 wins already this season. First 2 coming in Oman, then he won the GP Camaiore. A couple of wins in Tirreno Adriatico, stage 3, and that epic stage 6 has to go down as one of the best wins of his career, you feel. Looking for number 6 today to cement his place at the top of the UCI World Tour. As far as Heinrich Hausler is concerned, and who is from New South Wales in Australia, hasn't picked up a win in UCI cycling since the Tour of Beijing 2011. That was the second stage. part of a season that team saw him took 3 wins. And of course, a man who previously has Grand Tour win stage to his name, down at the Vuelta a España in 2005. Harry Nice wins Tour de France, of course, as well in 2009. He picked up a stage there. Dauphiné. But it's been a while. And well, the support of all kinds of different origin on the side of the roads today.
Whatever floats your boat, I guess. Certainly going to be noticed if you go out dressed up as a rabbit with some purple curly permed wigs. But once again, a few words of anger, it struck me, at the front of this pace-setting group, directed some of them at Bernie Eisel. I just wonder whether Bernie Eisel's instructions have been just to take his foot off the gas and try and allow the chasing group to set up Edvald Wasserhagen.
Oh, 1 minute 22 seconds. Sky, Lotto and Blanco now starting to get riders towards the front. A Megaformer Quick Step still there as well. Ian Stannard yet again back at the front of this group. 10 riders back. But it's Lotto who seem to be organising themselves more seriously than anybody else here. And they've already lost Jens de Busseret. But today they are riding for Andre Greipel.
I have to be honest that the shades being sported by the Europcar rider there, they really do nothing for me. I don't know, they're slightly surreal. They look as though they should come out of I'm trying to think of they should come out of something like Blade Runner. That's what it reminds me of. They're just bizarre. I've never seen anyone wearing anything like it. Is it just black tape, or is it actually glasses?
There's some black tape underneath the glasses. That's what's making it look absolutely weird.
Yeah.
But anyway, as long as it's doing a job, keeping them warm or keeping any glare of any light out of their eyes, then I suppose that's the idea.
The interesting point there is that there were certainly one rider who suffered damaged cornea after Milan-San Remo the other day, and also midweek, I think. So,
and at the Omlop earlier on this year.
So it could have something to do with that.
Borut Buzic of Slovenia, national champion at the front for Astana, alongside Jaroslav Popovic. Peter Sagan now rolls through. They're continuing to work hard together, this lot. Juan Antonio Flecha, the erstwhile classic man. Steiner Vandenberg right at the back of your picture there for Omega Pharma Quick Step.
Well, as many people have pointed out, it's Juan Antonio Flecha launching a ludicrously early attack on the Tour of Flanders, which it is pretty early because it's a whole week before that race takes place. But he is the man who actually broke the back of the field. He was the man who set out on his own. He set out on that first break, and ever since, well, he's worked very hard since Heinrich Hausler led the remainder of these riders back up to join him. He was there with Basayev, he was there with Ladognu. Ladognu is still out there, Basayev's dropped back, but it is Flecha who is responsible at the moment for this breakout in front, and it's looking increasingly likely that these are going to be the riders who contest the finish.
23 k's to go. Again, nothing doing as far as the profile is concerned. It is fairly flat. And this is Juan Antonio Flecha in conversation with those in the team car. Hilaire van der Schudden is the DS for them. Buzic and Hausler. Hausler once more quickly out on the pedals. Bodnar behind him, the Polish rider for Cannondale. Part of the Polish contingent leaving Cannondale this summer as Sylvester Schmidt went to Movistar. And alongside Eros Capecchi as well. 1 minute 30, gap has grown again. And what does Steiner Vandenberg do here? Getting some final instructions from Wilfried Peters. Another bottle for him. Fumiyuki Beppu, we're getting reports, has dropped out the back of the peloton. There's a couple of sips of whatever that was for Steiner Vandenberg, and that was enough. So a bottle full of something is a present for somebody in that particular ditch there. I think that Hausler would be pretty happy to get a placing. He was 13th at Milan-San Remo. Closest he's got has been 5th on any sort of stage. 5th on the third stage of Qatar. 5th on the first stage of Paris-Nice, where Nasser Bouhanni, the French champion, won.
Interesting there, just a few words being extended across to Omega Pharma-Lotto's Stein Vandenberg, who is the man out in this break from his team car, and it's really just a question of what do I do, I'm sure, as far as he's concerned, because try as he might, he's not been able to slow this lot down, and they are pulling away again.
Well, if he's going to have a go at winning it here, it's got to be an attack. He's not going to beat anybody on a sprint. Same with Fletcher. Ladagnou, you'd have to think as well, and Popovic. Andre Amador, also one of those riders. Bodnar, you know, is at the service of Peter Sagan, no doubt about that. Buzic lost his man when Bazaev drifted off and the 12 became 11. Bodnar at the moment just trying to protect Peter Sagan as much as he can whilst they still both share the workout. There's Greg van Avermaet on the front for BMC with those pretty ugly helmets again. Being the source of much debate and comment. Once more the fashion and science shifting to closing the vents up and making them a little more aero. We've seen that on the Sky helmets as well. Vents closed. Here's Andre Amador. Plenty of combative rides we've seen from him over the last 12 months. Whether it's been Giro or otherwise. Talking of combative rides, we've mentioned Vandenberg and his excellent season form at the moment. Certainly not afraid to light up a race. He's from this area as well, Stena Vandenberg from Oudenaarde. So he'd be a happy man next weekend to do something. Ex-Katusha rider. Second in that omloop, beaten 300 metres to the line by Luca Paolini. Now a chat with the Director Sportif for Andre Amador. Chente Garcia Costa is the man in the car for them today. Man who retired not so long ago.
And it does look highly unlikely that this break is going to be caught now. Minute and 32 to go. Amador completes his words with his team car. And, well, in the mix, Bernie Eisel, a former winner. Peter Sagan, one of the joint favourites to win this race. And Heinrich Hausler. They're the three that you would expect to feature. One of them to feature on top of the podium from the selection of 11 riders there.
Buzic. Second wheel there, just behind Bodnar. Saw him on the podium the other day in Wevelgem. Second in the end to Oscar Gatto. Italian calling that his most beautiful win. I'm sure he'll be disappointed that his team weren't invited to this one. Of course, Vosdorf-Vlaanderen, not a World Tour race, a European Tour race. I should say a UCI Europe Tour race to give it its proper title. But they still managed to attract 13 World Tour teams. Very, very good field for that one. Though still many of the big boys were recovering from the efforts at Milan-San Remo. They've been back for this weekend, for Friday and for today. The E3 prize. And today, of course, it's Ghent-Wevelgem. 17 kilometres of which remain. 1 minute 30 the gap between 11 riders escaped up the front. Bernie Eisel and Steiner Vandenberg on your screen. But the biggest of the big names in this group, Peter Sagan. And I think that a lot of the big sprinters will be ruining the moment they let him go. Nothing changing as it stands. 16 Ks remain. Passing towards the town of Verwijk at the moment. Just 2.3 kilometers till they arrive at that area. Then on to Geleuven, Mennen and Wevelgem will be our final two destinations.
Of seconds trimmed off the advantage, but it's not coming back quickly enough at all.
Sagan will be desperate to win this. Big favourite. Of course, he has those 5 wins already this year. None in the big classics though. So disappointed at San Remo last week. 7 days later, real chance to make up for it here.
Well, he was in a very similar position last year. It was a group of 30 riders, of course, that he was taking on, but he was there, and he was outfoxed by Tomic. And you just wonder, there are some riders in there. Heinrich Hausler, vastly experienced. Bodzic, vastly experienced as well. Just wonder whether Bernie Eisel as well. Got a few tricks left up their sleeves that could just play into each other's hands, and Sagan might be forced to go too early. He's got to try and keep his cool. He's got to rely on his talent in this situation. He is a rider who should win this contest.
All about making sure he does his job. It's been well marshalled before by now by him and his teammate. Hausler just behind. Again, watch out for Heinrich Hausler.
An interesting rider to note here is that Bernie Eisel, because hasn't done a huge amount of work at the front throughout this break, whereas Sagan has. Hausler has as well, although he's dropped off a little bit now, but they've just been quite happy, those two, to sit back and watch. Hausler coming to the front now, but Sagan has done huge amounts of work to keep this breakout in front.
Very right. The thing I'd say to counter that is the fact that we saw Sagan beat the big competition in Tirreno Adriatico. He showed that he can really live with Greipel and Cavendish, and that I think would have made a lot of people who were saying, okay, yeah, he's a super rider, but he's no Greipel, he's no Cavendish. People had to sit up there and say, well, this man can live with just about everybody. And whether he's done work or not, I'm sure he would argue that he still has the legs. Eternal second man in these races has to prove it here today, and you're exactly right that Eisel, if he's got the legs, will prove to be one of the big adversaries. Fast man sitting on the right hand side of your screen altogether, that. Bozic, Eisel, Van Avermaet, Hausler and Sagan. Those on the left would all need to get away. 14 Ks to go. There will be moves, I'm sure, there will be dots, but who's going to make them and when? Because this gap is not changing. 1 minute 26.
Well, sitting on the front there, Andre Amador looks as though he's all out. Just getting set now for the final push in. The layers come off. Bodnar.
Maciej Bodnar.
Getting rid of his.
Well, we heard that radio communique, if you like, shouted into our ears around 15 minutes or so ago, that all of the numbers had to be bared. They are UCI rules, and there are fines for those that don't show them. Peter Sagan has been showing his for a while. And I think up in this top group we're more or less sorted as far as that's concerned. Only Jaroslav Popovic hasn't done it, but don't expect him to be doing anything in the spring.
Bodnar just shielding himself behind the team car to haul himself back up into contention. You can see the difference between the two groups there, and that is, it's a fair old distance.
We haven't been with the back group for quite a while. Interesting to see what's going on as far as who's doing any work. And here we go, right on cue. BMC all grouped up together. Lotte have a couple of men together. Omega Pharma Quickstep really lacking too many teammates, but Cavendish is still chatting away in the group. Edvard Boassenhagen is there as well. 1 minute 27. Is anybody going to really put the hammer down? Who is going to take the responsibility on? That is the question. If nobody does, then it is all over.
1 minute and 11 seconds, 1 minute and 10 seconds, 1 minute and 9 seconds. Suddenly a push at the front here of the chasing group, and they've trimmed 5, 6, 7 seconds off the advantage. Is it going to be a question of this group now being caught? 9 kilometres to go. The lead suddenly has taken a massive hit, and it is coming down further.
It is. This is interesting. At the moment, you still got to say, Sagan, Sagan, Sagan. Can anybody beat him? But GPS, not always reliable at this moment. Seems to be tumbling a little too quickly to be true. Let's see. It'd be nice to get a look back and see exactly what's happening in the group behind. Road Furniture comes up. According to the GPS, we're down to within a minute. And I think that must be correct, because Juan Antonio Fletcher's gone out the front and has really put his foot down now. Response from this set of group. 53 seconds, we're getting it on race radio now. It is correct. An almighty acceleration from behind, and finally some sort of organisation, and we might have a bit of a race on as far as a bigger sprint is concerned. Certainly not confirmed, but there can be no complacency here in the last 8 kilometres from Peter Sagan, Heinrich Hausler, Bernie Eisel and the rest of them.
Well, it looks now as though that chasing group stand a genuine opportunity of reeling in this breakaway, which looked ever so unlikely. They've suddenly turned up the pressure, and they've trimmed that lead down to 50 seconds. I mean, they took 25 seconds off there in the blink of an eye, and they're going to have to do it again. However, Fletcher was very quickly out there to try and drive this along, and to Peter Sagan straight back out on the front.
Well, it's in Fletcher's interest, of course, to get away here, and here we go. First look at the chasing peloton for quite a while. It is strung out. That's the difference on the road, and this is what's happening up the front. Work being done by Luca Paolini for Alexander Kristoff. We see people at the front wearing both Lotto and Omega Pharma Quickstep jerseys. Also working for Mark Cavendish and Andre Greipel respectively. BMC organised as well. Azul Blanco for Lars Bohm. This is getting very, very interesting, although the gap at the moment again has seemed to stabilise once again at 52 seconds. Popovic, Fletcher, Ladagnu, Vandenberg all need to try and get themselves in a position where they can attack, especially the likes of Fletcher. Boy Van Poppel is their sprint option, but he's nowhere to be seen a little further on behind. It's now Maciej Bodnar who's being sacrificed, you feel, for Peter Sagan. He's the man at the front who'll be doing all the work here. Heinrich Hausler happy to get a free ride, but he knows that it's going to be a difficult job to beat Sagan. Slovakian has the race on a plate. 7Ks to go, 48 seconds. Excitement starting to build again, just after it had calmed down for the last 20k or so. Has the peloton behind left it too late? That is the question. Bodnar, Sagan, Ladagnu, Amador, Popovic, Fletcher, Hausler, alongside Bernie Eisel, Van Avermaet, Bozic are all up there at...
Just wonder whether it's going to be one of those classic days where they can see them start the sprint, but we're going to see both lots of riders in the final straight, but the group of 11 out in front is going to be the one still contesting, and Peter Sagan is, I think, a little concerned out there. He's sent Bodnar back out in front, and then he's gone and had a little snipe on the front himself. Bozic there as it comes down to 40.
Well, 6Ks to go, still going to be a tough ask, but it's going to be exciting into the final few kilometres. The pace picking up. Again, they cannot afford to be disorganised here. The peloton, the pack is hungry. It's chasing and chasing very, very quick. 40 seconds on your screen. We're gearing words of 30 odd seconds in our ear now on race radio. There's Jaroslav Popovic. Again, don't expect him to be too involved towards the end here. Juan Antonio Fletcher's there. It is the Cannondale shirt of Maciej Bodnar being used once more on the front. Had a brief rest. If he can go for a kilometre or two more, he might just help this group to get to the line.
Gloves off for Peter Sagan. Means business. Driving in here. Still on our screens it says 41 seconds. Race radio disagrees a little bit as the fans here in Menin just starting to cheer these racers on.
5 kilometres to go, wants to go under this next bit of furniture on the road. Our sponsors announcing that there's just 5,000 metres of racing remaining. 42 seconds is the difference. It's going to be difficult for the peloton when they come through these sort of chicanes on the cobbles again. In the narrow roads, I can tell you it's a decent and wide enough finish for a bunch sprint here in the final few hundred metres. Menin, the final town before we get to Wevelgem. Heinrich Hausler now the man on the front. And the sprinters here aren't going to want to use too much of the legs, and that's what's going to play into the hands of the chasing peloton behind. Heinrich Hausler, as Maciej Bodnar, I think, is now feeling the force of what has been used up in the last few kilometres. He's the man who's done all the work, and you can see now he's come off the front, and those who are contenders to win, the gap starts to come down again with a Megaform, a Quick Step, and Het Stegmans pushing on behind. Luca Paolini is the man for Katusha. Some big sprint names and riders in the pack and hunting here. Greipel and Cavendish, Edvard Boisen-Hagen, the likes of the young pretenders as well, Brian Kokar, the outsiders, Daniele Benati for Radio Shack, and Team Saxo Tinkoff.
Well, they're either going to have timed it to absolute perfection or they're going to get it ever so slightly wrong. 4 kilometres to go, 36 seconds the difference.
Looking around here, I think for the moment they can just about afford to do so. And here's the attack. Steiner Vandenberg, he has to make a run. Fletcher will want to be on his wheel as well. Sagan doesn't want to let the opportunity go. Vandenberg and Fletcher have just this opportunity to win the race. Eisel wants to stay in with the opportunity of taking the sprint. Bozic is there as well. Difficult for Popovic, who's on the tails of everybody at the back. And you'd have thought as well that Amador would have wanted to be up in the move there.
It's clever play from Vandenberg though, because by slowing down there, another 5-6 seconds trimmed off. Peter Sagan is having to attack now. Fletcher looks to respond. Sagan knows that he needs to push this along.
Peter Sagan going out himself as we get the first few cars out of your picture coming across the line now. And this is a surprising move from Sagan. Not wanting to wait for the sprint, Sagan has gone on his own. Well, is this Wyver, is it not? He wants to keep the gap up. He obviously feels strong enough. Sagan trying to perhaps distance any of those competitors who are thinking of having a dig at him.
Well, an immense attack this from Peter Sagan, and he pulls away. Bernie Eisel, Greg van Avermaet and Jaroslav Popovic, the only riders who are finding any way of going with him. But at the moment Sagan has pulled out in front, and this is a very brave move. It's a gutsy move.
Heinrich Hausler is one of those who's been distanced for the moment, chasing Popovic, Van Avermaet and Eisel, but it's Peter Sagan who is making the gap grow again, and the peloton must be thinking behind that having almost got them in sight, Sagan has suddenly gone and is pedalling on for dear life. The danger with this for Sagan is if he's caught here, what's he going to have left for the sprint? Eisel and Van Avermaet suddenly looking interesting bets as well. Two quick men. 40 seconds now the gap, but we're still waiting to get a gap, maybe just 10 seconds. There we go, 10 seconds indeed between Sagan and the next chasing group. The question is, can he hold it for just over 2 kilometres still to go? Is this another tactical error from Sagan? Eternally the man who finished second in these types of races up until now in his career. Under 2Ks to go now for Peter Sagan. Those behind still chasing. But well, there's a little too much of tactical error going on here for me. Eisel looking round, and they're gifting Sagan the win doing this. 14 seconds now, and he's well approaching the kilometre to go barrier. Once more they get organised again. A lull in proceedings, that for me has made sure that Sagan will most probably take the win here.
Could be a very decisive lack of communication there between the 10 other riders. Peter Sagan pulling away. He's getting ever closer to the Flamme Rouge in that final kilometre. And Jaroslav Popovic sitting on the front seems to be the only one doing some work in the pursuit. And Peter Sagan criticised for his poor adoption of tactics over recent weeks, over recent years, on occasion in the big races, seems to have got it absolutely spot on today. Van Avermaet sets off in pursuit.
Well, he has to do as well. Van Avermaet now going. Sagan approaching the kilometre to go, Barry, but it's Van Avermaet and, of course, Juan Antonio Fletcher behind. Popovic, Amador, Eisel. Oh, they're dithering, they're dillying, they're dallying, they're taking too long. And Peter Sagan has this one on a plate. Yes, we could say it's a decent tactical move for Sagan, but perhaps only so because of the poor tactical judgment of those behind and alongside him. Sagan is going to roll in as the winner here, 17 seconds, and look at this, they're almost sitting up behind.
I don't think many of them have got anything left. You saw there from Van Avermaet when he went out in front, he gave it a go for a while and then looked back and realised had nothing left in the legs, and Sagan puts his head down. He's inside the final kilometre, cruising towards what will be a very notable and noteworthy victory in his career.
Peter Sagan up in front, Amador the latest to make a move. Got to feel that it's only podium places though, as Steiner Vandenberg again wants a spot on the podium. He was there in the Omloop, second that time, and at the moment sets off in pursuit of the Costa Rican. Juan Antonio Fletcher just behind him. Sagan in the meantime is going to be there all on his own to pick up the applause. 5 wins already this season as he strolls into 300 metres to go. Peter Sagan of Cannondale, the Slovakian national champion, second in San Remo, second in the E3 prize at Harelbeke, and today is going to be first as he soaks up the applause after 4.5 hours and lays down a huge marker with 7 days to go to the Tour of Flanders. Peter Sagan, a wheelie over the line. Typical celebration from him. And what a win for Peter Sagan. In the meantime, it's the sprint for the next places. Hausler is up there as well. He wants a second this time at least. Heinrich Hausler leading it up. Hausler ahead of Van Avermaet, but he's going to run out of steam. It's going to be Greg Van Avermaet or Borut Buzic, one of the two, to take second and third. And in the meantime, a little further behind, this is what's going to play out. Arnold de Mar leading it out. It's going to be Andre Greipel. Andre Greipel ahead of just about everybody else. Greipel against de Mar, and it's Greipel who wins the sprint from the group behind. And well, Ghent Wevelgem, far from being predictable as we thought it might be in terms of a big bunch sprint, with plenty of kilometres being chopped away, has produced a very, very interesting day indeed. Peter Sagan, the winner of this race for the first time in his career. He now takes his total of wins to 45 at just 23 years of age. And Jonathan Harris-Bass, is there anything that this man can't achieve?
Well, you definitely feel that there isn't anything that he can't achieve. One just hopes that he gets the right advice and that he also doesn't decide to, I don't know, change the way that he rides, because people have him lined up for being a Tour rider. And I think in the future he could become one of the greatest Tour riders if he should so choose, but he should concentrate, as is the want of cyclists, on the classics at this stage of his life. He could easily win every single monument there is out there. He could win every single classic there is out there if he puts his mind to it. The one thing I would call into question is potentially his team. I'm not sure that they're quite strong enough, but as he showed today, well, does he really need a team around him? Great work from Maciej Bodnar to guide him through into those final 12 kilometres, but he still needed to make that decision to go out on his own with 4k to go, and he did that, and he was bold. And what a celebration after just over 4.5 hours in the saddle, most of which much he spent pulling on the front of a group of just 11 riders to drag them away from the main sprint bunch, and he still has the nous and the showmanship as he comes across the line. He is a great character for cycling. He has a great future in cycling, and I think this is a day where many will consider that he came of age.
It's almost as if you just stuck a middle finger up at those who were racing a little negatively at the end there. Doesn't want to be caught by the peloton. You're all starting to look at each other. I'll sit off. They allowed him to go. And Peter Sagan wins his first big classic. Congratulations to him. And he deserves every little bit of the opportunity to show us what he can do with the tricks. Sagan saying, I'm very happy. Thanks to Maciej Bodnar and the rest of the crew. Of course, he had to do a lot of work because the people in the group didn't really want to ride together. It was difficult because of my position in the group now. Everybody knows how dangerous I am, and they didn't want to do the work. I can sort of understand that, but I was angry at the end. I was not sure what they were waiting for. Of course, did they want to do a sprint with everybody? I certainly didn't. I can understand that, again, that they're not happy to do a sprint with me because they know that they're very likely going to lose, but they had to go for something, and it wasn't the right decision to wait. So I saw that Quick-Step had tried to make an attack, so I thought, why not have a go myself? Let's see what happens. I felt good. I got away well. And when he was asked about the finishing and winning with just one wheel, you don't need two wheels, said the interviewer Renat Schott. He said, well, yeah, I couldn't do it properly because I was too tired, I'm afraid. It's the first time that I've had so much advantage in arriving to the line on my own, so I thought I'd give it a try, but I'm afraid I could have done it better. And when asked if he was the favourite now for the Tour of Flanders, he said, yeah, I think I've been favourite since the start of the year. We'll see next week how he gets on. So, good chatting to Peter Sagan. This is what was going on behind. That was a ladies' race. Marcos Shimano winning with Kirsten Wild. Arms aloft. And Dutch cycling in rude health. Encouragement right to the line. Rabobank in second place.
Maar net als woensdag jongstleden in Wevelgem, waar ook de tweede grote prijsstad Wevelgem voor dames werd afgewerkt, hebben we dezelfde winnares als woensdag gekregen. De snelste dame misschien
Van Sanne van Bassen in second place there.
Ook deze Gent-Wevelgem gewonnen. Komt uit Nederland, uw applaus voor Kirsten Wild.
En Kirsten Wild.
Ze reikt de overwinning.
Winner. And a very, very happy Dutch team. It's the big sprinter that did it. And Kirsten Wild gets her flowers as reward for a hard day's work on a very, very cold day indeed. Big applause. Women's racing more popular each year, certainly very popular in this part of the world. You can see that they're finding the sponsorship easier to come by than the men. Rabobank still running the women's team and doing a very, very good job of doing so. So Kirsten Wild as winner of the Women's Ghent-Wevelgem 2013. She got a little plaque to add to her flowers and some fizzy stuff as well. But the biggest bottle of all goes to the winner. Well, there'll be time for a quick celebration. Hans de Klerk, who is the course director, comes on to give his congratulations as well.
En champagne op het podium, dan weet u wat er komt.
And it's champagne time. That's it, get out of the way, give it a good shake. I wouldn't dare open that now. There we go. And I'm not sure they're too happy to be being drowned in this weather. It's going to be a very, very long walk home for somebody. The hoods go up, so do the umbrellas. But it's the photographs that they're interested in. And it's a very, very enjoyable celebration indeed. How it should be. So thank you very much to our ladies winners. Kirsten Wild with a big, big win to add to her palmarès. So we await Peter Sagan at his crowning moment. We'll also see Borut Bozic for the second time this week. And of course Greg van Avermaet, only Belgian presence in amongst the final podium. Confirmation then, Heinrich Hausler 4th, Juan Antonio Fletcher 5th as we await the podium ceremony itself. Mathieu Ladagnou, reward for being in the breakaway again, is a 6th place. Benny Eisel in 7th in a race that he likes to be up the top in. Steen van den Berg, Jaroslav Popovic, and of course the man who finished in 10th place, André
Provinciegouverneur, de heer Karel de Kaluwe, mag zometeen de derde in
Greg van Avermaet then
op een flesje champagne gaan trakteren. Heeft hij ondertussen al de bloemen
looks a happy man for his efforts. BMC today, plan A was certainly to go with Thor Hushovd. They seem to be working hard and working okay, but just couldn't set up the sprint like many of the teams in the end.
Op de tweede plaats in deze Ghent Wevelgem, dames en heren, is geëindigd met uw applaus Borut Bozic.
Slovenia's Borut Bozic again gets his chance to wave to the Flandrian public. Did it just up the road in Wevelgem the other day.
In de wedstrijden die komen gaan, het is de heer Nico van de Cavaille die voor Bees de champagne uitreikt aan Borut Bozic. En Maya krijgt de eer om hem de zoenen en de bloemen te overhandigen. En dan, dames en heren, de winnaar van de 75ste editie van Ghent Wevelgem.
75th edition of Ghent Wevelgem. 2013 edition, cut down to just 183 kilometers. Whatever the course, whatever the weather, this man turns up and he wins. Peter Sagan, top of the UCI World Tour. That's a frighteningly big lead as far as that's concerned, but he wins his first big classic. And today is a day that will live long in his memory. For a man that's used to winning, this will be right up there against the best of them. Sagan takes the win, the shield to go with it, and of course I'm sure there'll be a flurry of bets on his name for the race next week in Oudenaarde.
Om de champagne te overhandigen. Champagne op een podium, dan weet u wat er voor een tweede keer komen gaat, dames en
So
heren.
Ghent Wevelgem 2013 won by Peter Sagan, Bozic in second, Van Avermaet in third, and a special race, a unique race, one that wasn't as predictable as we thought it might be, was won in the end by Peter Sagan.
Peter, het geldt voor één keer geen champagne. De wereld insturen, maar hij is zijn manifest primus bezig. Dus opletten, dames en heren.
A cold day. A colder day than most are used to on the bike. It'd be a roller's day if you were training. But as Sagan finally gets the champagne ready. It's a win for him. Might be a big bottle, but it's not doing its job. And he won't be able to have too many of a swig of those, because he's got to be ready in 7 days' time to take on the Moors of the Tour of Flanders.
Zij worden nog bij de pers verwacht. Dames en heren, laat ik u van harte danken om deze weersomstandigheden te trotseren. Het was niet alleen voor de renners zwart.
So that's the picture of the winners. That's the one we'll see on tomorrow's papers. Sagan, Bozic, Van Avermaet. Ghent Wevelgem 2013 is brought to an end with Sagan landing in first place. And it was a little less hairy than that. Certainly hope he's going to make it now we've shown him. I don't think there'll be a wheelie at the end as well either. So Sagan. This is how it happened. Early break involved Van der Fletcher, Juan Antonio Fletcher, of course, of Vacan Soleil. Basayev was there as well, as was Ladagnou. Peloton let it go for a while, almost 2.5 minutes they had. But once they got on to the hilly part of the course, the 60 kilometres that contained the 9 climbs that had to be negotiated, this is what happened. Gilbert was working hard. Tom Bonen was the man to go out. Nasty, nasty accident for him. We'll see what happens as far as Flanders next week is concerned. He eventually had to retire after climbing up to just 1 climb to go. Oh, and Heinrich Hausler went for it. There are a few riders who follow, one of which was Peter Sagan, another was Andre Amador. Bernie Iser was in there as well, and a group of 12 riders was soon set to be formed. Well, this group would go on to take the last 2 or 3 climbs together. And behind, it was all up to Lotto Belisol alongside a Megaformer Quick-Step to organise things for their big sprinters. That would not happen. Certainly not on this part of the course. Still a long way to go yet. 40-odd kilometres to go whilst we see these images. Nobody shaking, nobody able to get away. The only man dropping out the back would be Basayev. Just over a minute the advantage, as there were just around 15 to 20 k's to go. They rode through the various towns on the way into Wevelgem, Finnish town. Not challenged too much. There was one scary period where the gap seemed to drop very, very quickly thanks to some hard work by Luca Paolini, a couple of the Lotto riders. But once he got within the final 4Ks, a little bit of dillying and dallying. Sagan wasn't having any of it, and he just rode away from his companions with quite a bit of ease, really. Van der Fletcher unable to follow. Sagan strolling into the finish in the end and winning with a very, very comfortable margin. Enough of a margin to allow him to do this. So he won on 1 wheel instead of 2. And Sagan with his first big classics win here in Ghent Wevelgem. The sprint that followed for the placings went like this. Heinrich Hausler leading it out after Amador had tried an earlier attempt to break away. Borut Busic coming from behind him though, and pipping by about 20 centimetres in the end the wheel of Greg van Avermaet. So the podium, Sagan, Busic, van Avermaet. We'll leave you with these images from Wevelgem. Sagan the winner. He's the favourite as we go into 7 days' time. The Tour of Flanders. Be sure to join us next week. From Jonathan Harris-Bass and me, Rob Hatch. Thanks for joining us, and goodbye.